Almost 100 years ago, the famous philosopher, mathematician Bertrand Russell, he gave a lecture titled, "Why I'm Not a Christian," where he argued that Christianity is both untrue and harmful. Well, in this short talk, I'm not going to debunk Russell's claims, although some of them I find to be quite dated, and many of them simply amateur readings or misreadings of biblical texts. Instead, what I'm going to do is just steal his title and drop the not. That is, I'm going to share with you why I am a Christian. Now, as I see it, there are many reasons why I am a Christian. Today, I have time only to explain 4. Let me begin on a personal note with my first reason, what I'm calling Jesus' irresistible call in my life. Jesus' irresistible call in my life. There are a number of memories I have from the first half of my life. I don't remember being born in March of 1972, but I do remember the great Chicago blizzard of 1979. And I remember digging a snow tunnel in my front yard all the way down to my friend's house halfway down the block. And I do remember when I was young, I used to talk to a stuffed squirrel, a squirrel named Todd. I do remember eating liver because my mother told me it was good for me. I do remember that Joe S. never bathed. I do remember I got a perm because it was the cool thing to do. And I do remember my teammate walking up to me near the end of a high school basketball game, placing his right hand on my shoulder and whispering excitedly into my ear that I was but one point away from breaking the school's single-game scoring record for most points in a game. I also remember missing both free throws. I don't remember forgiving him. And I do remember that my friend Nick was just 16 when that car hit him and killed him. And I remember his wake, and I remember his Greek mother screaming interrogatives at God. She screamed with one hand in the air, and the other, I can still see it today, clutching his coffin. And I do remember when I was 18. I remember the day, the time, the moment that my girlfriend said to me, "I'm pregnant." In fact, it's that last memory, that last reality that really changed my life. I was 18 years old. I was an honors student. I was in a good high school. I was a star athlete. In fact, at college, which I just started, I had just played in my first game on a team that would eventually finish second in the nation, competing for the Division III national championship game. And there I was. My girlfriend told me she was pregnant. Can you imagine? What would you do? Well, I did the right thing, or as right as I could think. I asked her to marry me. I quit college. I quit the basketball team. I moved home. I told my parents. I told her parents. I started to work. I worked at a tile and carpet company. I pulled old carpet off floors. I chipped old tiles off walls. And then I worked as a janitor, second shift from 3:30 to midnight. On June 23rd, 1991, my son Sean was born. And when I held his little hand in my hand, his fingers wrapped around this finger, I cried. I cried like a baby. I cried because my life was a mess, at least not what I expected it to be. And I cried for the first time in my life. I recognized God as creator. Now, I knew my part in this little creation, my son, but he was too wonderful for me to comprehend, too beautiful to call my own alone. But things didn't fall into place with me regarding God until he took away almost everything that I loved. In December 1991, 6 months after my son was born, my girlfriend broke up with me. She started dating another guy. She said it was over. So here I was 19 now. I was a smart kid, but not in school. I was a good athlete, but I was pushing a mop. My fiancée, and with her, my son, to some extent, were taken away from me. I had visitation rights. I had child support to pay. But here's where my relationship with God began to change. Why is it that God's voice is loudest when all that we love, all that we want, all that we need has suddenly been stripped away? His voice whispers when the sun sets and turns the sky blue, then red, then black. His voice pierces subtly through our consciences like a pin stuck through our skin when we sin. But his voice, it roars and it thunders in the pain. What does it profit a man to gain this whole world but to lose his soul? If you so much look at a woman with lust in your eyes, you've committed adultery with her in your heart. Go and sell all that you have and come and follow me. Unless you are born again, you cannot enter the kingdom of God. Jesus' words became to me not like chalk written on a chalkboard, on a blackboard, but like letters stitched within the very sinews of my soul. All that I'd learned about him from my parents, from my teachers at school, from my own Bible reading, God graciously pursued me with. He chased me until I stopped running and let the hound of heaven, as the poet Francis Thompson put it, have his way. Jesus, I prayed. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, early January 1992. I know you're real. I just arrived home from work. I've never doubted your existence. I made my way quietly down into the basement apartment. But I've never asked you to forgive me. I had a mattress that rested on the floor, a lamp, and a black Bible. Will you please forgive me of my sin and clean me up on the inside? I'm so full of lust and pride. I turned on the lamp, I fell to my knees, I cuffed my forehead in my hands, and I rested my head upon the mattress. And I promise you from this day forward that I will put you first in my life. Tears fell, fresh, clean like rain, an inch beneath the clouds, and the whole weight of my world, the world at that time, fell from my back. Why am I a Christian? Well, the first reason is God's grace, his awesome and his irresistible call in my own life. The second reason, and I've partly alluded to it, is the power of Jesus' words, the power of Jesus' words. Near the end of World War II in Warsaw, in downtown Warsaw in Poland, it was almost completely leveled. The only skeletal structure remaining in the main street was the Polish headquarters of the British and Foreign Bible Society. Now get this. The words engraved upon the only wall of that building that was standing, which you could see from the street, were the words, "Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away." You know where that comes from? Do you know who that comes from? Well, it's a quote from Jesus recorded in 3 accounts of his life, spoken nearly 2,000 years ago. "Heaven and earth will pass away," Jesus said, "but my words will never pass away." Now let me ask you, have you ever thought about that claim? It's quite bold, isn't it? But it's not just bold, it's so far it's true. It's a word about his words that can be tested by history. Jesus predicted the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, and it happened. Well, lucky guess. He predicted that many people from all the nations around the world would know him and believe in him, the son of a Jewish maiden from the nowhere town of Nazareth, and they have. A striking coincidence. He claimed that his church, which was first comprised of former fishermen, tax collectors, and thieves, and murderers, prostitutes, and the like, that church would remain, even if all the powers of hell fought against her. Oh, just a fluke of history. And yes, he predicted that his words would stick around longer than all created matter, the heavens and the earth, and so far, so good. No lucky guess, no mere coincidence, no fluke of history. He has been right about his linguistic longevity. And that's what I call power, the power of Jesus' words. Now think for a minute, think seriously, think soberly. If I told you that what I'm about to say in the next few minutes will forever be remembered, what would you think of me? If I were to claim that there is lasting value to each sentence I speak, what would you say of me? Well, those who know me might think I was making a joke. Those that don't know me might think I was a joke. You see, no one in the history of the world who had his head on straight talked like Jesus talked, claiming that his words have eternal value. Listen, I make my living by speaking, and yet I am self-aware enough to know that when words fall from my mouth, it's as if they fade into the wind. It's as if time comes and swallows them up. And it's not just true of my words or your words, it's true of everybody's words: celebrities, presidents, prime ministers, dictators, kings, and queens. But not so with the words of Jesus. Just get online after this talk and type in the words, "No one can serve two masters," or "turn the other cheek." And what will you get? Well, you will get pages and pages of Bible translations and Christian websites and church names and book titles and articles and names of musical pieces, paintings, all sorts of artistic expressions, and on and on and on. I don't care how long you've gone to church, if you've never gone to church in your life, how much you've studied the Bible or how little you've studied the Bible, you have likely heard the teachings of Jesus from the Sermon on the Mount, like "Judge not, lest you be judged," or "Do unto others as you want them to do unto you," or "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." You see, as skeptical as someone might be about Christ and Christianity, I cannot grasp how anyone can disprove Jesus' own prophecy about the longevity of his words. Was Jesus right? Well, yes, he was right. Whatever you think of him, so far, so good. He said his words would be around, and sure enough, I'm talking about them right now. You're listening to me talk about them right now. A prophecy has been fulfilled in your hearing. And we're not alone. In every continent, in every major city around the world, at this very moment, Jesus' name is being praised, whether in secret or openly, and his words, his precise words, are being explained and applied. But why? Why is this so? Well, I think there's something inherently truthful and powerful in Jesus' words because someone inherently truthful and powerful said them, which leads to my third reason why I'm a Christian, and it's this: the paradox of Jesus' claims and his character. His audacious claims and his exemplary character, his seemingly self-centered assertions and his certainly self-sacrificial actions. And let me explain and illustrate what I'm talking about. I'll start with some of his claims, two of the "I am" statements that he gives in the Gospel of John. Jesus said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." Now, what complete audacity when you think about it, to claim that the world is dark, that he alone is light. And if one wants to get out of the darkness, they have to follow him. And then listen to this one. He said, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet he shall live." Can you imagine the Dalai Lama, Pope Francis, a pastor like me, some mullah, some rabbi, any religious figure out there standing up among their followers and saying something like that, or saying precisely that? I can't. Now, if we move from John's gospel into Matthew's gospel, there are equally controversial claims to unearth. For example, here's how Jesus begins his final speech in the Gospel of Matthew. After his death and resurrection, he gives what is called the Great Commission, and he begins that by saying, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me." All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, that's not a statement you hear every day, is it? And yet it's so familiar to some of us that we don't even recognize how bizarre it is. So play along with me. Think of the most powerful man alive today. Let's say, for the sake of argument, it is the president, President Trump. Now, if President Trump is as self-confident as he is, if he said what Jesus said of him, what would you say of him? If he called a press conference and said, "I wanted you all to know that all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me," what would you think of him? Well, you would think of him as an unrealistic egotist or an overly ambitious idiot. Nobody talks the way Jesus talked. Those today, even those today who have great authority, even if they overestimate their power, they overesteem themselves, they don't talk the way Jesus talked. They don't claim to be king of heaven and earth. They don't claim that every person from every time and everywhere will one day come before them to be judged. They do not claim to have authority to forgive sins. They do not claim to establish an unconquerable church and institute new sacraments that have themselves as the foundation and the focus. They do not claim that their commandments are to be obeyed. They do not claim that they are to be loved above everything else, even mother and father. You know, and I know, that we're usually repulsed. We're taken aback by people who talk so much about themselves, especially someone who demands our love and obedience, our total allegiance. And yet, what is it about Jesus that makes him not only likable, but also believable? Deluded people, they delude no one but themselves. You only have to be in the presence of such persons for just a few minutes before you recognize their claims are bogus. They're living in a fantasy world. But with Jesus, that's not the case. His first disciples, real eyewitnesses in real history, they didn't see him as delusional. And neither have the billions of people throughout history who have and do and will bow the knee to this peasant from Palestine. Now, John Stott calls what I'm talking about the paradoxes of Jesus, the paradoxes of Jesus. Dr. Stott writes that Jesus' claims, they sound like the ravings of a lunatic, but he shows no sign of being a fanatic, a neurotic, or still less a psychotic. On the contrary, he comes before us in the pages of the gospel as the most balanced and integrated of human beings. That's the paradox, you see. That's the paradox of Jesus. He covers himself with these disturbing claims. They're disturbing because they're so self-focused, and yet we see him clothed with utter humility. And Stott puts it this way: I see this paradox at its sharpest when he was with the disciples in the upper room before he died. He said that he was their Lord and their judge. But then he took a towel and he got on his hands and his knees and he washed their feet like a common slave. Is this not unique in the history of the world? There have been lots of arrogant people, but they've all behaved like it. There's also been humble people, but they've not made great claims for themselves. It's this combination of egocentricity and humility that is so startling. The egocentricity of his teaching and the humility of his behavior. Now that is exactly, for me, that is the paradox of Jesus. That's exactly it. I don't know what it is that has convinced so many people from so many countries and cultures and centuries that they've read about and heard about Jesus of Nazareth to say, yeah, I'll bow the knee to him. I'll stop pretending I'm king and I'll call him Lord and I'll do whatever he tells me to do. But for me, the trust in him and the giving allegiance to him, it comes not just from the lofty claims themselves. They're not just dangling in midair, but it comes when I see that those claims actually fit his character. So the three reasons I'm a Christian are: first, Jesus' call on my life; second, the power of his words; third, the paradox of his claims and his character. Now the fourth and final reason is that Jesus has dealt with, or will deal with, the foundational, the most basic of human dilemmas, issues, problems. What I simply mean is this: there are some big issues, three in particular, big issues, foundational problems, most basic human dilemmas that we all struggle with, each and every one of us, and that is sin and death and injustice. Sin and death and injustice. Death is undeniable. I don't need to argue the point. Whether we die of COVID-19 or not, we all will die. Your grandparents will die, your parents will die, your siblings will die, your friends will die, you will die, I will die, we will all die. Death is undeniable. Injustice is obvious. We see injustice all around us. It is as black and white as the front page of the morning paper. It's also just as obvious in our own homes. One of the first phrases that a child says, isn't taught to say, just ends up saying, is, "It's not fair." I have 5 children. By the time they all hit the age of 5, that was their favorite cry of iniquity. It's not fair. It's not fair that he gets this and I don't get it, that she can do that and I can't. You see, even from an early age, and even if our injustice barometer is a bit off, our parents should give us everything we want, we all sense that the world is filled with injustice, with real injustice. So death is undeniable, injustice is obvious, but sin, our third major problem, well, no one seems to believe in sin anymore, at least not call it that. Well, I believe in sin, and I'm not afraid to call sin, sin. Sin, 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 sin. You've at least heard it 7 times in your life, and at whatever age you are, I will guess that you have at least committed 7 sins, if not 70 times 70 sins. We're all sinners. We all miss the mark of perfection. We're all not God in his absolute holiness. We all do the things we ought not to do, and we neglect the things that we should do. Our minds, our mouths, our hands, our hearts are stained. We can't get the damn spot of sin out. We are all guilty before God. Now here's the good news, what Christians call the gospel. It's what I believe in. It's one of the reasons I'm a Christian, because Christianity, it takes seriously sin and death and injustice. Yes, Jesus Christ offers a solution to our foundational human problems. Christ has died, Christ has risen, and Christ will come again. With his death, he atones for our sin. With his resurrection, he gives us the hope of eternal life, life that is beyond the grave. And with his return, he will judge the world in righteousness. He will make everything, finally, he will make everything right. Now, at the end of Bertrand Russell's lecture, Why I'm Not a Christian, he says, I do not think that the real reason why people accept religion, and he's been talking specifically about Christianity, has anything to do with argumentation. They accept religion on emotional grounds. Now, I agree and I disagree. I agree that emotional grounds, or better, what I would call experiential grounds, are part of the reason I'm a Christian. I've experienced God, and yes, I cried. That's expressing an emotion when Jesus called me to himself. I don't dismiss emotions experience as some sort of invalid form of discovering truth. So I agree with Russell that most people, me included, accept the Christian faith on emotional grounds. What I disagree with, however, is his claim that the real reason why people accept Christianity has nothing to do with argumentation. I disagree because today I've given you, in very truncated form, but I've given you 3 lines of argument, 3 reasons why I'm a Christian. The power of Jesus' words, the paradox of Jesus' claims and character, and that Jesus has dealt with or will deal with soon the biggest problems we all face: sin and death and injustice. You know, it's common these days for someone who becomes a Christian in some parts of the world to be violently persecuted, in other parts to just be persecuted with the roll of the eyes or certain comments that come like this. It's common, very common, for Christians to receive this usual patronizing comment when they share with someone about their faith. Oh, that's nice for you. I'm glad you found God. I hope this Jesus thing will work out for you. It's lovely, I suppose, you have some sense of purpose. It's helpful, I would imagine, to have comfort during these difficult times. Well, I don't deny for a moment that having Jesus in my life provides purpose and gives me a tremendous amount of help and comfort. However, I'm not a Christian for the perks. I'm not a Christian because it's therapeutic. No, I'm a Christian because Christianity is true. Who Jesus is, what he has claimed, and what he has accomplished is true. When the Apostle Paul stood on trial before the Roman governor Festus, after hearing Paul's claims about Jesus, the governor said to him, "Your great learning is driving you insane." To which Paul replied, "What I am saying is true and reasonable." Now, I don't know what you will make out of what I've said. You might agree, this is all true and reasonable. Or you might, like Festus did, dismiss me, move on from these silly preachers who do these God talks. But whatever you do and whatever you think of me, I hope I've made you think. You may not agree with me, you may be angry with me, you might even label me intelligent but insane, but I hope that something of what I said rings true to you, both in your head and in your heart. Jesus said, I will let his powerful words work on you right now. He said, come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, that is burdened. Are you burdened with sin? Are you burdened with guilt? Are you burdened with fear? Are you burdened with helplessness, hopelessness, burdened with meaninglessness? All who are burdened, come to me, and I will give you rest. He will give you rest and freedom and purpose and life. Resurrection life.